Hello and welcome back to Thinking Caps. I am Tim Glom, VP of Content here at CHEETAH Digital, joined always with my co-host Richard Jones, our CMO.
Good to be here.
And this week we have a special timely edition that we're coming to you. It's the end of June. There's so much going on in the news right now. I heard a marketer earlier today, I think it was on Twitter, said, man, this is deja vu. There's just so much disruption going on. But let's dig straight in, Richard, because we put together an agenda. We have a ton of things to share with our audience today. Why don't you go down our bulleted agenda list?
Will do. So essentially what we're going to be talking about is marketers and the social media quagmire. One only has to open any kind of news, whether it be industry news or just general news, and you will see a whole bunch of stuff going on, the social media ad boycott. There's lots of new news coming out around privacy and disruption. So we're going to break all that down. We're going to, first off, kick it off by looking at a Forrester report that was actually released last month in May. It's okay to break up with social media. And specifically in that report, we're going to talk about some points that Forrester make, which are pretty tough on the community we serve. We're dedicated to marketers, and they're saying that marketers are somewhat culpable, if not very culpable, in the state of social media. So we're gonna come on to that. Yep. We're also going to talk about the trust economy. Yep. Which is something that Forrester is also talking about, which I think is an interesting thing to look at. The broader spectrum of what's going on, and maybe give a view of what might be the right thing to do for marketers in the future. Okay. We have to talk about Apple's IDFA announcement and disruption. Yep. Big news there. Definitely. For anyone in ad tech. And then we're going to wrap it up and look at, what's the consumer think about all this? What's their POV on trust, privacy, and loyalty? Well, let's dig in, man. The first one on our bullet point is the Forrester report. You want to talk a little bit about what's in that Forrester report? I do. And I think, the temptation was to just jump in and talk straight away about the social media ad boycott. But I actually think, in many ways, this report, which sort of preceded the kind of majority of traction around that report. I mean, obviously, there was lots of campaigns going on for a number of different bodies before then, but certainly some of the big announcements of the big advertisers joining the social media ad boycott, it's actually happened after the Forrester media report. It's okay to break up with social media. And to give you a kind of a little bit of a stat in terms of how they think about the quagmire, 37% of US online adults believe that social media does more harm than good. Oh, boy. And only 14% believe the info they read on social media is actually trustworthy. Oh, geez. Yeah, it's a sort of damning statistic. But I think what's probably more interesting about the report for us to kind of examine and look at is the sort of accusations against our community that marketers were somehow very culpable for a lot of that, a lot of the situation we're in today. Now, there's three things. There's three accusations I want to dig into. But first of all, let's just sort of step back a little bit. In the late 2000s, right, and the early 2010s, social networks like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc., they were the hot club, right? We all wanted to be part of that as marketers. We all sort of jumped in. Sure. We didn't necessarily know what we should be doing and how we should be jumping in, but we just knew we should be jumping in with both feet. Now, if you fast forward a decade, and social networks are in a, existential quagmire at the moment. Well, it's not existential, but it certainly is a period of real disruption where marketers are asking, well, society at large are asking some very fundamental questions around these platforms and how we should be engaging with them and whether they're good for us as a society. So let's go back and look at those three things. What are the three charges? The number one was that brands, marketers were, party crashing, right? We were never really invited to the social media party. Oh, you mean Facebook wasn't built for marketers? Funny enough, no. It wasn't. But brands had and still have, real FOMO of the hot new thing, and they certainly did back in early 2010, and that period when we were all really jumping into Facebook and other social platforms in a really big way. Brands invited themselves in many ways according to Forrester, to join this social conversation by blindly propping up, branded organic pages and accounts, even though audiences weren't really willing to interact with them on social media. Tellingly, in 2020, only 24% of US online adults actually agree that it's cool to be associated with a company or brand on social media. And when organic presences didn't work, marketers binged on social advertising, increasing global social ad spend from 75 billion in 2018 to a forecasted 165.6 billion in 2023. Now, I was part of that, right?
Same.
I was absolutely part of that. I saw social media jumped in. I thought, actually, hang on a minute. This is a wonderful thing to change the way marketers have been doing this kind of mass push advertising to more of a conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say from one to many to the one to one.
Yeah, I founded a company called Engage Sciences, which ended up becoming YN and then became Cheetah Experiences, and we were one of Facebook's earliest partners in Europe. We were actually invited by them to be a partner because they saw what we were doing with interactive experiences to engage consumers on other platforms, web platforms and stuff, and said, well, how about doing it in Facebook? And at the time, I was really, really intrigued because the narrative coming out of Facebook was traditional advertising is just a one-way push model. It doesn't really work. Brands need to be engaging more with consumers. It needs to be interactive. This is a new dawn of relationships between brand and consumers. And I thought it was a very noble thing. I think the very sad thing that happened really very quickly is the pressures of the money men took over.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that algorithm switched like, oh, man. I remember. I was there.
I mean, like any marketer who's lived through this has realized Facebook went from somewhere that was encouraging you to talk to your consumers to someone where they were telling you to pay to talk to your consumers.
I mean, that wall came down like a prison gate, man.
But not only that, I think the ethos of what Facebook was about in terms of the relationship between brands and consumers totally changed.
Yeah, fully.
And it was, no, we're an ad network now. And I think, that in some ways is an accusation which is, well, okay, we all live through it. Perhaps that's fair enough. But let's look at number two, right? Forrester says in the report that brands were clueless about what consumers want on social networks. Marketers aren't even clear on what kind of content audiences want to see, if they must, from companies. 68% of US online adults don't think that brands or companies share interesting content on social media, indicating that brands have no sense of purpose on social networks of how or who they should be, catering their audience to, and on how they're trying to woo them, which is, it's a damning stat. But perhaps one could say that's somewhat connected to the journey that we've all been on social, where we jumped in and we thought it was going to be something, and it ended up being a very traditional advertising platform, and we were kind of left there trying to have a conversation that really wasn't happening because of what Facebook did with the algorithm.
Yeah, and they did it themselves. And again, the interaction and everything that we had that was new and fresh from a marketing perspective all went away. It all turned into, blase, blah, 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 same old, advertising disruption.
So my view is I don't think 1 and 2 particularly have, as an accusation, a lot of credence. I don't feel that the marketers have actually done anything wrong. I think it's just the natural evolution of how we were interacting with a platform that had a lot of promise initially. I think the third accusation is one where we do have to look at that. And I think what we're seeing play out in the industry media is marketers' reaction to the situation we're in. Oh, yeah. This is total. I mean, what's going on right now is just, it's changing everything. And this accusation, right, that we are, we're propping up the worst of society through, putting all our dollars in and around these platforms, it has some credence, right? Social networks have developed negative reputations for failing to address issues such as fake news, privacy violations we've talked about. Left and right. Online bullying, addictive behavior. Again, we're putting dopamine in the brain with the way that we look at the likes and the
chase the validation from our peers and
and what's that doing for mental health? There's a lot of studies out there right now. So that's all sort of a background, I think, which and sometimes brands are the source of this toxicity. I mean, we have to admit to it. Detox Tea used celebrity endorsements on social networks to misrepresent its health benefits, according to this report from Forrester. The Fire Festival made a great.
It was a great Netflix. It was an awesome Netflix show, wasn't it?
But the way they use social media to drive the hype, there are some issues there. Amazon, I think, according to this report, really shocking. Really, Amazon launched an employee ambassador program to almost comedic effect when seemingly planting ambassadors engaged in a Twitter war of words with company critics. Right? Someone should have been shot for that. And then, even honest social advertisers aren't necessarily absolved. According to the Forrester report, they fuel social networks with their advertising spend while asking for no safeguards for a healthy environment in return for society. And I think that's the interesting thing that is coming to bear now with the social media ad boycott that we see today. And there are other issues in and around that marketers are having to kind of contend with. There's a lot of frustration with the walled gardens measurement models, right?
Sure.
Social networks stubbornly refuse to feed granular campaign level data to companies' multi-touch attribution models, that although they'll export their aggregated impressions and spend data to marketing mix models, that's been a big issue for a lot of marketers. And maintaining this status quo actually empowers the walled gardens, right? They're getting all the data and they're not sharing it with major marketers. In fact, the report talks about Holland America, saying that their biggest challenge is connecting the dots between social activity and offline cruise bookings, right? And that we've heard that many times from many advertisers. I mean, our own customer P&G, what's Mark Pritchard done? He's built the database because he can't. The walled gardens are going to stay closed, and he's getting fed up with the ability to get the data they need to really understand what's going on with their marketing, their advertising.
What's really frustrating to me is this sniffs. Again, back to the deja vu. This is exactly what the television model, the problems were. They had no multi-touch attribution. They had no real metrics. I mean, the people who own the set-top box of any given TV or the app or the smart TV, they have all the stats. They know how long you were on a show or actually watched a commercial or not from a pixel firing. And what's nuts to me is in this social media world, everything is digital. All the analytics are there. They're just not being shared downstream to the advertisers. So.
Right. So, let's also look at another interesting stat I think they've got in the report. It's 41%, right? 41% of millennials and Gen Zers, right, who are the most active social media users, already spend less time on social media than in a past. So it's not just marketers changing their strategies, but we're also seeing some shifts in behavior around social media, which I think is interesting. Yet there is this advertising mismatch with the data that we see in this report and what advertisers are intending to do. So the AMA study found that social media use will fall or level off in the next 3 years. I think we're already seeing that. Yet, confusingly, 68% of advertisers anticipate increasing their spend. So, it does bring me back to that issue with which we talked about quite a lot. But did Facebook, Google, etc. Did they create a world where it became easy for marketers, right? This hyper-personalized content at scale in an era of very loose and fast data is now starting to break away. We're seeing societal issues with the very platforms, the networks themselves. Marketers are worrying about reputational damage for not standing up and actually trying to support a more healthy environment for our society. That I think it's clear social media isn't really necessarily helping. I think that's clear. And I wanted to a lot of what's going on in the media, talking about social media and the social ad boycotts, there's a lot talking around kind of hate speech and, and free speech. Should certain politicians, when they're saying untruths, be, should their posts be taken down? There's a lot of stuff going on around that. And I don't want to get into the politics of that. But what I will say is the algorithm itself, I think it's clearly on social platforms making society a worse place because you consume content in a tunnel. Right? And it doesn't matter who you are, what tunnel you go down to, the algorithm basically will start feeding you the content that you're looking at and more of it.
Yeah, it just keeps laying out that track, that golden road based on, what you're already engaging with.
And I had, I'm 46 years old, my wife's similar age, educated individual. And even with her, I had to say to her once, I was like, she'd sort of gone down a certain lane of politics and she was going onto social media and it was actually YouTube at the time. And, she's looking at her homepage on YouTube and it's just full of all this similar thinking, right? This very closed view of the world. And I was like, you do realize that isn't a curated page of the internet by editors.
Your neighbor next door goes to YouTube's homepage and it's a completely different experience.
Different experience. Yeah. And whatever lane you're going in, that's what you get fed because the only thing the social medias care about is eyeballs. They don't care
keeping
about
you engaged. Yep.
They care about your eyeballs. And if it makes you turns you into a absolute nut job that sees the world in very, very small focus, they might not realize it. I don't think that people necessarily understand what the algorithm is doing to them and their life.
They absolutely do not know. And it's the known unknowns, right? They don't know what they don't know. And how many millions of just Americans, we're going into an election cycle, are being fed into this and don't know that they're being led down that path. It's a little scary.
So, I mean, it's good in a way. I think what we're seeing with the social media ad boycott, we're seeing, a big movement take place. There's a number of different people behind it, of course.
So right now we have Ad Age this week. It's all over. I mean, it's all over the homepage today. Today's June 29th. We're recording. All these brands are getting behind this boycott. Unilever, massive global brand. Hershey's, Starbucks,
Honda,
just the list goes on.
It goes on and on.
Yeah.
And I think it will continue to grow because I think, sometimes it's quite easy to see what the right side of history is. And I think we need to.
And that's some of the quotes that you're seeing in here in some of these articles. If you go check out the Ad Age coverage of it, people do want to be on the right side of the industry history. And that's what's inspiring to me is marketers are starting to make the right decisions based on the right information, not just to jump on some bandwagon. I mean, this really is a movement. So,
and if you weren't convinced by the argument, well, apparently Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have allegedly been phoning up CEOs, getting them to move for change with the might of their dollars, which I think is really interesting, and hopefully, some good will come from this change. So I definitely support marketers for standing up and asking for a more healthy environment in our social networks and not necessarily wanting to be all in with their dollars to prop up, which I think is a fairly unhealthy environment right now. Certainly one that needs to be looked at in a number of areas.
So, but what's the real financial impact of this boycott? I mean, is this? Do you think that this is a statement, or do you think that this is really going to put the hurting on these social network platforms? Because we have some stats around, so far.
The reality is, the beast is so big. If you're talking about Facebook and Google, is even larger. These kind of actions aren't necessarily, they sound impressive, but they don't necessarily are going to have much of an impact. I mean, we know that of the top 100 brands on Facebook, it only accounted for less than 6% of all Facebook's revenue last year, according to data from the advertising analytics firm Pathmatics. I mean, 6% is not a lot. Right?
No.
The majority of their revenue is coming from very small businesses who are using their platforms.
Mass scale,
Not the big guys that may collectively have had more of impact if they were a bigger generation of their overall revenue.
I think it's a massive impact. But look, we're dedicated to marketers. What are marketers supposed to do around this, right?
Well, so I mean, Stop Hate for Profit is a great campaign. There's many other bodies involved in it, but I think at the end of the day, step back and it's like there is a problem here.
Yep.
We have to recognize it. It's not getting addressed. You can ask yourself as a marketer, is this something that you want to watch from the sidelines, or do you want to get involved in? I do think we're in an environment where there's a lot of data that says that consumers will vote with their hearts and their minds. Their wallet will follow their heart, right? So it's the time for marketers, I think, to stand up and be accountable for issues, and perhaps in a way it wasn't in the past.
So one thing, there's another article there where it talks about Ad Age is covering where are these dollars shifting, right? And what I saw was interesting to me, expected, I believe, but even Eileen Fisher, a large women's wear brand that's been around for a long time, has explicitly called out, hey, we're moving to other channels like email. We're moving to things that we can own. So I think that's interesting too, to watch not just the narrative, the boycott, who gets on board, what kind of dollars are being pulled back from social media, but where are those dollars gone? So whole nother thing that we'll cover here in Thinking Caps and watch out where that goes.
Well, I think there's another thing that we're seeing Forrester and a few other folks start talking about, which is this concept of the trust economy.
Sure.
Which I kind of like, because I think we're seeing a number of different sort of moving parts going on, but actually for me a lot of it can be pulled back to what do we stand for as marketers? How do we actually treat our relationship with our consumers? Do we respect privacy? Do we hold ourselves accountable for the behavior of the platforms that we put our money into? The trust economy, I think, encapsulates a number of these things, which is really at its heart is, what do we stand for, and what kind of relationship do we want with consumers? And I think with that, we have to include privacy in this whole, view of what's the right thing for marketers to be doing. And I think we had some, major news in the privacy arena that came from Apple last week, which was all around kind of what they were doing around the IDFA, which if you thought, Google's news around kind of deprecating the cookie over the, in a 18-month time frame now.
Yep.
This is another level.
So you're talking about the IFDA.
Yeah, it's another.
IDFA.
Yeah, it's another level of disruption. So, Apple announced new privacy changes, right, to its upcoming iOS 14 software that will significantly hinder how media buyers and brands target, measure, and find consumers. Right, one change will make it harder for apps to track iOS users across different apps and websites. Another will actually make attribution, so determining which tactics contribute to sales or conversions, much harder for marketers, right? And these changes that were announced last Monday at Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference apply to the company's identifier for advertisers, right? It's the IDFA.
Yep.
And basically, for those who don't know, it assigns a unique number to a user's mobile device, right? Advertisers have access to the feature and they use it in areas including ad targeting, building lookalike audiences, attribution, and encouraging consumers to download apps. And you got to think about this, right? I mean, when you're getting asked for permission, and the permission saying, hey, would you allow company X to follow you across all of your websites, all of third-party apps, etc. Who's going to say no to that? And not only they have to say yes, they have to say yes to it across every platform you engage them with.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's killed it. It's killed it.
This is such a hurdle to life as we know it and day-to-day operations as they are right now for ad targeting. It's going to be nuts. And I presented to some grad students earlier or late last week in Pacific University. They didn't even understand how location apps and the data, you have a great example of going to, get a medical procedure and getting a hyper relevant ad instantly out of it. I mean, grad students didn't even understand all of this, permission tracking and how that fed into their advertising platform. So,
and think about it, right? This news from Apple, which is literally the death knell for so much of the ad tech industry. It's really Ad Age is an article and they call it a tectonic shift.
Yeah,
right? And that is not an exaggeration. It really is. Yeah. But that's coming on top of Google's announcement of deprecating the third-party tracking cookie inside 2 years. It's coming on back of the California Consumer Privacy Act, which actually begins enforcement on July the 1st. It's on us. I mean, this we've been talking about this shift for a while, but it just keeps getting bigger. So the question is, what do we want to do as marketers? What's the right way? How do we actually ensure that our brand doesn't get caught up in this?
Yep.
What's the way that we can come out of this a winner versus coming out a loser, being damaged by a lot of the disruption that we see? And for me, it's go back and look at what are consumers actually telling us, right? And so we talked a little bit about this in previous podcasts, but we did research with eConsultancy, a 6-market piece of research, looking at all of these consumer attitudes. And I just want to come on to some of those attitudes and just tie them into this conversation that we're just having now. So, right, we found and that was all kind of published in March, so it was in the COVID-19 shadow. So very relevant to what we're seeing today with the disruption, the social media ad boycott, etc. Consumers are turned off by personalized ads, right? We found that 39% of US consumers don't like personalized ads driven from cookie data.
Yep.
Right?
So snooping, tracking, you don't know where it's coming from.
Yep. Right? Okay. In other markets, it's even higher. Australia, 44%, etc. So a significant, we're almost getting to 1 in 2 people that don't like you doing personalized ads, right? Very, or hyper-personalized ads off data that they haven't actually willingly given you. We've seen that 70% of US consumers, right, don't trust social media platforms with their data because of privacy issues, right? While 37% are doing things like regularly deleting cookies, 30% have installed an ad blocker. This is loud and clear message that the trust economy hasn't existed, and it needs to exist in order to get better relationships between brand and consumers. We've also seen that email beats social ads for driving sales, right? 73% of US consumers have made a purchase from an email offer versus only 31% from a social media ad and 26% from a banner ad, right? Consumers are 42% more likely to engage with an email offer if it's personalized, and we talk at length about how you get the data to do the personalization.
We're great at that.
In a way that doesn't tread on privacy toes, and that's zero-party data. Go look it up. Go to our website if you don't know anything about zero-party data. This is all part of this disruption and this picture that is evolving that marketers need to actually adapt to. And then the last stat that I want to talk about is loyalty. There's 2 stats actually with loyalty.
Okay.
30 consumers, right, will be loyal if they're encouraged, right? And we found in the UK, 34% of consumers who may buy from a given brand claim they are not loyal to that brand because they were not offered any kind of encouragement to remain loyal.
They weren't even asked to be loyal.
Yeah, there was no loyalty program. There was no consideration for how do I want to actually build a closer relationship with that consumer over time and have a mutually beneficial relationship to reward that engagement and increased CLV. The second stat is that we found that loyalty participation is on the rise. In the US, 9 times as many consumers are planning to participate in more loyalty programs in 2020 than those planning to reduce participation. So let's unpack all of this.
Sure.
What does this actually mean? What is the right thing for consumers to be doing? And I think it's becoming crystal clear. It's time to look at where we're putting our money. It's time to hold the platforms and the social networks to account. It's time to understand that social advertising, whilst once might have been a great way to get hyper-personalized content out to people in a cheap way, ad rates have gone through the roof.
Sure.
Consumers have been loud and clear saying that they are pissed off with the amount of personalization, the misuse of their data that's been encouraged by the Facebooks and Googles. And marketers have got to start now, I think, voting with their wallets and looking at doing what Mark Pritchard at P&G is doing, and thinking about a different way. And that different way, I think, is clear from the data. You need, as a brand, as a marketer, to unlock that consumer, that direct-to-consumer relationship, right? You don't want to be having to pay every time you talk to someone. The algorithms shut you out of being social on those platforms, right? You are pushing ads at people. How about looking at the data, looking at the way that consumers think and feel about these issues and going, do you know what? I'm going to turn the unknown consumer into a known consumer. right? I'm going to build my marketing database. I'm going to understand my consumers, not from snooping on them and buying dodgy data, but actually by asking them questions, learning about them, collecting zero-party data, that's self-reported data that's been willingly shared by consumers, usually in return for some value exchange. I'm going to bring in all of the first-party data that I have around consumers as they're interacting with me as the brand, POS systems, databases, looking at how they're interacting with your content, your web analytics, opening your emails. There's lots of different places you can get first-party data, which is far more beneficial in terms of the trust economy than buying dodgy data or snooping on people. Through bringing all that data into one place and getting a 360-degree view of all of your interactions with the consumers, building out your first-party data profile and augmenting that with your zero-party data, you can start to deliver very personalized one-to-one relationships with consumers in a far better way than you can by just dumping all of your dollars into hyper-personalized content on social media and doing lookalike audiences and stuff, things that now are actually getting infringing some of these changes in privacy. And then I think ultimately we need to think about what's the value exchange for a increased close relationship between brand and consumer over time. And that's the thing that's brought out in the research is that loyalty programs are the perfect framework to do that. Not only do people want to get involved in more loyalty programs, but it gives you that construct to actually reward engagement, data collection, being the ambassador for the brand on social platforms by sharing your content and talking about you and giving good positive reviews and all the rest of it. I think social media will benefit from your customers saying great things about you. Your consumers, batting for you, if you like. Concentrate on building your direct relationship with consumers. Concentrate on building out your loyalty programs. Starbucks, one of the people that came out in terms of the social media ad boycott, has got one of the strongest loyalty programs in the world, right? I think they're doing things the right way. North Face, actually, very, very interesting. One of they were
the first one. They kicked this whole ad boycott off on June 19th. They were the ones.
They did indeed, and there's a great Forrester article from the analyst Jennifer Liu, which is a blog that you can go see on their website, which talks about that, saying is North Face, is North Face going to be the North Star? And this was 10 days ago, June the 19th, and wow, was she right? Like the list of brands that have joined the social media ad boycott since then is almost overwhelming how quickly it's happened. And the North Face, they're part of VF Corporation. We were just talking about VF Corporation last week with the Loyalty Magazine Awards, where Vans won the best loyalty program in the US in those awards, and so. Is there a correlation here between the brands that are standing up to what we're seeing in terms of the social media quagmire and voting with their dollars, and the brands that are also switched on enough to actually really foster those direct-to-consumer relationships and take back ownership over their own customer base?
And that's what I think the summation here is really. It's own your audience, right? To your point, build it. We know that email is a viable e-com channel. We saw the stats in the report. You can get the report straight from our website. And look, a lot of these advertisers are still going to continue. Facebook will eventually make the changes. They'll come up with something. Ad dollars aren't going to dry up, but you are more powerful if you take, and Mark Pritchard laid this out for everybody. Somebody in charge of $7+ billion, the largest advertiser on the planet, said, we're going to collect our own data, and when we want to go to any given walled garden, I don't care where it is, we're going to bring our attaché, and we're going to know more about our audience than them. So instead of going, hey, Google, hey, Facebook, can you reach these types of people? Or, you've got these cookies. I don't know them by name, but I'd love to get in front of them. You're going to know them by name. You're going to be able to bring, the data that you need to those walled gardens, do the advertising when you want to do it. So it makes total sense. It's crystal clear. You have to invest in yourself. You have to invest in your own data. Now,
I've got a prediction, which is interesting. You say that Facebook, and it's not just Facebook. I don't want to super con on them. It's social networks that it maybe have gone a little bit awry. Certainly over the issues that we've seen recently. When you say they have to change, I think what's interesting is the way for them to change, right, is for them to become the brand's loyalty programs. But what marketer is going to trust
right.
to become, their loyalty program now, because, hey, guess what? It'll be free for the first year, and then you'll be paying through the nose.
Yeah, $100 a client.
So I think they've probably busted their flush on taking marketers through to a very big paradigm shift. As we're seeing right now, and then being trusted to be the ones that will, allow you the access without raiding your wallet. So I actually genuinely think there is no other way. You really, you can't look to the social networks to solve this problem. You can't abrogate your relationship with your consumers to third-party platforms. You have to build it yourself. You have to think about the gamification, the loyalty programs to encourage people to come back to you, and you have to get the data from them in a transparent way. The relationship needs to be truly, truly mutual, truly, truly transparent. I think the trust economy is going to become a bigger and bigger thing, as will social activism in terms of how brands put their markers on the table and stand up for what they believe in.
Well, this is a tornado of a year, and let's not forget the things we're not talking about. Remember privacy regulation? We covered a lot of that in the beginning of the year. There was a lot of people, Senator Gillibrand's trying to pass some federal regulation. That stuff's all there, people. COVID's happening, and Congress in the U.S. has shifted to, funding and things like that, but it's going to come back. So you're going to have to deal with privacy regulation. Another great reason to own your own data, a one-to-one contract with every individual consumer that most likely will transcend any impending federal or new state regulation. So there are a million reasons why you need to start building your own database and investing in your own people. Look, preaching to the choir, right?
There's a lot of resources out there.
So we're obviously going to cover this a lot, but I do want to talk a little bit about some of the assets that we have available. If you're watching, if you love what we're talking about, if you're in it, you want to learn a little more, I've got quite a few assets. First, we've got that Forrester report up at CHEETAHdigital.com. It's okay to break up with social media. All the stats that Richard and I covered there. He's got some great graphs. It's not just superfluous. It's some really good stuff. Also, email, an incredibly viable channel. We have an amazing white paper that's really getting a lot of traction. Number one secret to smashing your email marketing KPIs. And again, not just theoretical. We tell you how to do it. We give you the steps and the free strategy, how to do it, and we use actual client success stories. We're using real stats to show you how global brands are doing this today. And then we touched a lot on loyalty at the end here. We have a marketer's guide to building loyalty and why this is far more than points and discounts and what most people think of loyalty. And in fact, check out some of the things that Vans are doing, the communities they're building with their loyalty, as well as Fleet Feet, an amazing one that I think was just quoted in Forbes earlier this month on how they put millions of runners together. And there's tons of resources on our website. So don't feel like you have to scour the web to go find this. Cheetah Digital is your one-stop shop for everything that we're talking about, all these topics you can dig into on our resources page.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see what next week brings.
Oh, geez, it's coming. It's coming. Well, look, we're going to continue to do this. Do we have anything else we want to get out, or do we want to close this one up? We've probably...
Let's close this up. I think this is a passionate topic for us. I know it speaks to what we believe in, in terms of what the right thing for marketers to do. And let's see what happens in the next couple of weeks. This story is not done.
Oh, no, this is just getting started. So, it is going to be interesting next week. You can always check out Thinking Caps on our website, CHEETAHdigital.com. You can always check us out on iTunes. It's just simply Thinking Caps. So we've got tons of guest speakers there, tons of topics covered. It's usually a couple a week, so there's plenty of content there. Richard, again, great to see you here in the studio. We're staying safe. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.
See you soon. Thanks.